I'm just teasing people here to like, it's like dangling that yarn in front of the kitty cat to jump on your YouTube and go check your video out when we're done. But I love what you're saying here. We have super chats we're going to get to. We have another manuscript or another parchment we want to look at. I think it's a parchment.
Yeah. It's parchment.
But I do want to say what you're saying is fantastic, because the same practice that happens within the tradition of rewriting their own tradition, you can apply the same thing with what we're seeing in Genesis about rewriting Mesopotamian stories, about they're doing it with other culture, but obviously combating it. So they're in direct opposition to the growth of civilization. There's all sorts of stuff going on there, but I'm actually doing that series with Dr. Josh, a scripted series on Genesis and where it gets its mythology from. But I love what you're saying here, because it makes sense as to why we as Christians have looked and said, thus it is written, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Huh? Then you go back and you're like, this has nothing to do with Jesus. But
doesn't matter.
They make it all about Jesus. So
yeah,
they weren't like, I can imagine anachronistically. I've had Rabbi Toby Singer come on and go, they're being deceptive. They're lying to you on purpose. And it's like,
they're
really?
Just doing good? They're just doing good Jewish Bible exegesis. This is the way. This is the way. So it's how it was
done.
Your
face is glowing even more right now. I'm starting to get terrified.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. Maybe we should look at this other manuscript. I wanted to show this other one because this is the other side of the discussion here of what we've been talking about. There's Gerald Lancaster Harding with his cigarette in his mouth. What a sexy dude.
Dude, that's pretty cool. I always wondered about that too. All right, so here we are.
So he was the director of the Palestinian and Antiquities department.
Okay.
At the time when the British mandate for Palestine came to an end, and the establishment of the state of Israel, and then the Arab state there as well. So, anyways, what we have here is a fragment of a very fine looking manuscript. So the amount of material that we have surviving from this particular manuscript is similar to the copy of of Exodus Leviticus that we saw earlier. So this is a large fragment, and remember what I said, this suggests strongly to us that this survived from a large manuscript. If you go to the bottom here, you will see preservation of a 2-centimeter margin, which also indicates to us that this is a surviving copy of a very large manuscript. The script itself is it's the kind of thing that it's the kind of thing that makes me horny. What can I say? When I look at this script, and if you zoom in on just one of these, like on this larger piece here, to take a look at just some of these beautiful letters. This is an exquisite script. This was written by a professional scribe. If you just actually pause it there, go back a little bit, just a little bit. Yeah, stop there. If you look, you've got right almost in the center of your page, you actually have 2 occurrences on the other. Yeah, on bookends of where you're circling your cursor there, you have the same word, panim, and then el, and then panim again. And when you just look at the way the letters are formed on this on the word panim, you can see that each letter almost appears identical to its counterpart in the other word. This is an indicator to us that this is a professionally trained scribe. He is very, very experienced and excellent in his craft. This would have been produced by a member of what I would identify as a scribal guild. In the Hasmonean kingdom, at least, they had started to establish basically a professional class of scribes that wasn't necessarily attached to the temple establishment, but was, part of the merchant class, writers who would, for their vocation, write what people wanted them to. People would bring, a papyrus or a parchment to them and say, I want you to make a copy of this for me. I want you to make it this big or this small. And they would sit down and write it. What the professional scribal guilds gave us are lots and lots of these, exquisitely crafted and, again, very expensive to produce manuscripts.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular manuscript is not as old, not nearly as old as the other one. This
And
one,
what script is this? I mean, what book is this?
This is an Aramaic script, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that's interesting about this particular script, and one of the reasons I think it is as old as it is, I have dated this I just based on a cursory glance. I haven't taken the time to do it, and now I kind of like to actually sit down and date the thing. But just on the basis of what I'm seeing, it looks to me like it's probably mid second century BCE. I'd say
BCE.
BCE. So like somewhere between 150 to 100 BCE, second half of the second century BCE there. Now, one of the interesting things about this script is if anybody knows what a lamed is, that's the Hebrew letter that makes the L sound, hence lamed. They're easy to find on any manuscript because it's like the only letter that the part of which actually it sticks up above the line. There it is. There's a lamed. One of the interesting things I think about this particular script with these lameds is they're quite wide. Many people who read Hebrew are unaware of this, but so they're not unaware of the fact that there are final letters, like there's a different form of certain letters that appear at the end of a word. That's common knowledge. But what many people are unaware of is that the letter lamed once had a final form, but it disappeared over time. We have a handful of manuscripts from Qumran where there are actual final lameds in them, distinct from lameds that occur in the middle of a word. But those are all gone. What I like about this particular manuscript is the way that the lameds look suggests to me that this is almost a fossil of a final lamed without actually being a final lamed. So I think it's at this transition point where the final lameds are gradually falling out of fashion. But whoever learned to write and wrote this script has come to the point where this final lamed form he probably learned, but is now incorporating throughout his construction of the manuscript. So this is like I said, exquisitely crafted text, manuscript, very expensive to produce. Obviously survives from a very large scroll on the basis of the size of this fragment, which measures, I believe it's about 16 centimeters across. The margins are big. That's like a 2.5 centimeter margin on the bottom. It was probably a 3 centimeter margin originally on the bottom. The intercolumnar margin is pretty sizable. It's about a centimeter. If you zoom in again, I'll show you something else. On the margins, you can actually see the lines. Do you see that?
Yeah.
The lines that he marked out in constructing his manuscript. That's super cool, I think. Right.
Yeah.
And something that's important here too is oftentimes when marking out, when putting the lines on your manuscript, you're only going to put horizontal lines, and then you're going to put a vertical line for where you start your column, right? What this guy has done, which he's actually put a margin to help him find the end of his column too.
But it seems like he's willing to go over it. Whereas on the starting line, you see how everything's uniform right here, where they starts from right to left. On the right side, this line goes through the letters, which means he may have went, hey, try not to go too much beyond this point.
You have to, right? This
Right.
isn't Greek. You can't just start a word and continue it on the following line. You have to finish the word. So, and this is normal. Right margins in a scroll, a Hebrew scroll, are always, not going to be perfectly. Sorry, left margins are always not going to be perfectly uniform
Right.
because they're ending the line and they end it where best they can. The other thing too, you'll notice there's a blank line here. There's a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is probably like the end of a paragraph of some sort. You'll see. Zoom out again.
Okay.
On the other column, you'll see another sizable break right in the middle of the line. So these are the sorts of indicators that show that this is a piece of literature. It's large. And it's expensive, it's exquisite. It was treasured by the community that collected it. So what does it say? Um, so this is one of these types of manuscripts that scholars looked at it the first time and said, this is something that nobody's ever even seen before. So in that first column, you've got mention of, it says, for the tribe of Benjamin, Raphiah, for the tribe of Gad, Elio, and then there's a break, and then it says something like the rear guard, 20 years old, and then there's a break, and then it mentions a man from the Hasidim, and this is Moses. We know this is Moses because of what appears in the following column. It says a man from the Hasidim. He raised his voice, and then it breaks off, right? And then in the following line, it says, and his furious anger abated from Miriam, it says, and his furious anger abated, and Miriam was shielded from his eyes. So I think this line is talking probably about God, about Yahweh. And then in
Mhm.
that final line there, it says, over or against us. And then it employs a feminine singular verb here and says, she will lead us. So like this is one of the frustrating things when it comes to text, dealing with text that you don't know or that you don't recognize, right? That's brand new. It's super fragmentary. So we've just got like these snippets of stuff that's going on, but we can't figure it all out because there's so much that's missing here, right?
Right.
Um, to my ear, to my eye, this sounds kind of like Numbers chapter 12, Numbers 13. If you're unfamiliar, there's a point, but it seems almost reversed because I think it's in Numbers 13. There's an there is Numbers 13 is the establishment of the Council of 70,
Mhm.
where Moses, elects the 70 elders as representatives from the tribes, and they're all given names, and you see that here, right? For the tribe of Benjamin, some guy named Raphiah. For the tribe of Gad, some guy named Elio. Interestingly, these are not the names that appear in the Masoretic text or the Septuagint. And then underneath the break there, it looks like this is similar to the story about Miriam and Aaron confronting Moses and challenging his authority, and then God striking Miriam with leprosy, and she has to beg Moses for healing, right?
Right.
So it kind of looks like that, but I don't know. I mean, this is the best that I can do here, right? So we can see more of what's going on in the next column, and I'll read to you here what I have.
And where are we at on do you know exactly where on this we're at?
So I'll start at the top of the column on column 2. So you see the second column there?
Um, Not
Yeah.
really.
So
Which
on the left side, the big text on the left side, it's like that whole column of text, right? Yeah, that's the column. The second column we're going to deal with now.
okay.
All that. So, um, and again, you'll notice too, there's stuff missing, right?
Mhm.
There's damage and there's breaks and stuff, so it's incomplete. But we can see a lot more of what's going on here. So, uh, it starts off from where there's just a word all on its own that survives from a line that says "and your signs," but we can't situate it contextually. And then it continues. They explained in the statutes of Moses. And then there's a break where there's like the end of a paragraph. And here's where we can actually get into the meat of it and see it and read a continuous text. And this is what it says. So Elivu, the name of some guy named Elivu, responded and said, "Listen, congregation of Yahweh, and pay close attention, the whole assembly." And then there's a break here, and it continues. It says, "A man is accursed who does not stand, keep, and perform all of the commandments of Yahweh by the mouth of Moses, his Messiah. Nor does he follow after Yahweh, God of our fathers, who brought us from Mount Sinai. For he has spoken among the congregation of Israel face to face, as a man speaks with his friend." As I was, speaking with Yahweh
Like
just
right
before
now.
this
Yeah.
stream began. Yes, right. As a man speaks with his friend, or as a man might reveal to his friend, he has showed us a blazing fire above the sky. And upon the earth he has stood on the mountain to make known that there is no God except for him, and there is no rock like him. So the word rock there, tsur, is a word that's often applied directly to Yahweh. It's like a nickname we see in Deuteronomy 32, the Song of Moses. The congregation, so that's the end of Elivu's speech. And it says, the congregation answered, trembling had gripped them because of the glory of God and the terrible sound, and they stood at a distance. And Moses, the man of God, was with God in the cloud, and the cloud concealed him. For there's a break, and it says, when he was sanctified, and as an angel he spoke with his mouth. For who among flesh is like him, a man of the Hasidim, and who was never created before or since. And that's unfortunately the end of the column. But that's a text that in this second part, I'm not even entirely sure what to do with this. This is obviously, this guy Elivu is making an impassioned appeal. An impassioned appeal on behalf of Moses, saying, look, we absolutely need to listen to this guy, the Messiah of Yahweh, the man of God. And then so
I'll be right back. I'm sorry. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Continue.
So it kind of fits into some of what I think is happening in the earlier column, where Moses' authority maybe is being challenged to some degree. But this guy is offering an apologetic on behalf of Moses. But importantly, this is a text that it's not what we would call a biblical text, precisely because it doesn't look like anything really that survives in our Bibles. But the very important question to ask at this point is, the people who collected these manuscripts, the people who had this particular scroll commissioned, basically written up, what did they think this was? And I would suggest to you, from a very pragmatic physical perspective, because first and foremost, all the Dead Sea Scrolls are artifacts. They're physical objects, and we should take that physicality very, very seriously. And we should absolutely be using that in our evaluations of what these texts were, why they were important, what they meant for the people who wrote and collected them. And this looks every bit, from a physical perspective, as significant for the people who wrote and collected this literature as any copy of Isaiah or Genesis or Deuteronomy or what have you. And this is the point.
Mm-hmm.
The people who wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls, the people who lived in Palestine, the Jewish communities living in Palestine from this period, I would suggest the Jewish communities anywhere across the Roman Empire, collected literature. Certainly, they collected texts that survived in the Hebrew Bible, but they collected all sorts of things. Stuff that they probably thought was just as important.